Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Totally delighted to have Esther Veltheim with me today. Esther Veltheim and I've gone back for many years. I first met Esther in 2012 and then returned to do a breakthrough class with her the following year when my baby was like six weeks old, my son. So he was a breakthrough baby. Esther is the co-founder of the BodyTalk system and also the originator of the breakthrough system. So we're really delighted to have you with us today, Esther. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'd love to hear from you where the breakthrough system came from, because it really is your baby, the breakthrough part of it.
Yes, well, it was catalyzed over the years by so many people, of course. Well, I think it originated in childhood, this pure rebellion, that was always there. And then in 1989, I met John, who founded and evolved BodyTalk. And in the first couple of years we were together, we spent a lot of time living in a place called Donnybrook in Australia. And it was a naturist campsite. There were just maybe 4 or 5 permanent residents. And we lived there, and it was beautiful. It was on the banks of a tidal river with Aboriginal borrow rings everywhere and pine forests. And we used to sit by the campfire, and very, very different backgrounds. We just would talk together, and we were like two immovable objects meeting. I mean, we were very powerful catalysts for each other. So we would often we would discuss and dialect, and we would have playful interactions, and then we would have these big, and he would drive off in his yellow peril, and I didn't have a car. I would float down the river on my lilo, but we always came back. We always came back together, and always grateful, a little bit humbled for what we'd catalyzed in each other. Yes, so we were constantly throwing each other in upon ourselves to question, our own behavior, our own attitudes, our own perspectives. And so in that way, John was one of my best catalysts. Huh? So we would sit by the campfire, and we would talk about everything. And out of these talks came the modalities we teach in IBA, the first ones anyway, which were all geared around different forms of self-inquiry. So there's mindscape and freefall and breakthrough. And they each have a different way of exploring the human condition. And then 7 or 8 years later, BodyTalk began to evolve from John's background in healthcare. And it was another way of exploring the human condition, very much oriented towards, the physical body. So we were both from the beginning just fascinated by the human condition and questioning everything. Yeah.
And that's what I really found when I took Breakthrough. It really challenges everything that you thought you believed before. It's kind of really looking at all those assumptions and, questioning what we just don't necessarily question because we've had it our whole lives. We were conditioned in childhood, and so therefore we don't even know it's there.
Well, you have children, and I've been around lots of children, and most of us have experienced at some time or other, I think, when a child asks, they're very innocent, very clear, direct questions, and our ready-made answers just collapse, and we have to rethink everything. Yes, so they have that natural ability to catalyze self-reflection in us, because they're coming from such an innocent tabula rasa, and clear. So that's the great gift of children. And then as adults, of course, we've learned so much about life that despite ourselves, we start giving these ready-made answers to our children, yes? And we have so many. We learn so much, how we're meant to be in the world, who we are. Yes. So then, despite ourselves, we teach children things like, well, you're going to grow up and you're going to have to learn what it is to be responsible at some stage. Yes. So immediately as children, we learn the connotation of responsibility, that this is the doom and gloom I have ahead of me. So this is just one connotation we learn, and sort of it's downward hill from there. Yes. So it's not really what they teach us, it's the connotations we get from it all. And of course, then we teach from that place. So children are coming from one place that's powerful catalyst. And we start living from this preconceptions. This is how life is. And this is where we ask our questions from assumption, from connotation, from expectation, from fear. Yeah, quite despite ourselves. Yeah, because as you know, we all get this playbook as young children from parents, their parents, their parents' parents, ad infinitum backwards. Yeah. So we all understand that. So, and there are many different therapies around the world developed to exploring that. And I just couldn't find anything that took me, I don't know, deeper. But I kept on coming back to, yeah, so it's where we're coming from. Doesn't matter where we're going, where we're coming from determines how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we interact, how we speak, how we behave. And all of us, as of the age of about 3 or 4, more and more, we're living from a place of ignorance, from this hand-me-down playbook. Yeah. So in Breakthrough, I was looking for a way to shed light on the playbook, to shed light on the ignorance, yes? So where we're coming from. So I couldn't assume anything or guess anything, just began exploring my own experience, yeah? And then I had a lot of influential
And
teachers.
it's very much that catalyzing process, that it's that looking at overreactions, looking at those places where we're not taking practical action. And I know that that's something that you feel is incredibly important, like utilizing that energy of the catalyst, because that's where our defenses break down potentially.
Yes, problem is we think of overreactions as something bad, yes, that we shouldn't be having. And just this very idea has our relationship with emotions just in turmoil, yes?
Yes.
And I mean, little boys in particular were taught you don't cry, and we're taught, not to be angry. And so we get more and more out of touch with our emotions. And they, of course, inform us what's going on with us, what we need, what we don't need. And so the child comes from a place of innocence. Quite despite ourselves, we have to move into this living from a place of ignorance. And it's a reactionary place because it's not natural to us. Yeah, so as children, we rebel against those things we're taught that don't make sense to us. But we take them on anyway, because it's our parents, it's our culture, it's our society, it's our religion. It comes from places, that we respect or fear. So we live in a surface mind. Our mind starts functioning, instead of being very direct and focusing on this is happening now, and being totally immersed the way we are when we're children, more and more we're focusing from this happened yesterday, this happened 20 years ago, it's obviously going to happen tomorrow, I need to do this and we live from it's basically, I think of it as an ocean of resignation, this surface mind that's very goal-oriented and always looking at, we're taught who are you going to be when you grow up? I hated that question. It's like, I want to be me. But, and so there are so many things in
Expectation,
childhood.
isn't there? Energy of expectation that's overlaid, which we then want to kind of like people please or validate in some way.
Or rebel against.
That too. So, I mean, that's an interesting one, this piece about, validation and people pleasing, or the rebelling against, that whole something within myself. I was always like good girl, that was always my mechanisms, to be people pleaser, to be liked, and that kind of side of things. But then the bad girl gets repressed. And so it's like, how can we become all of it?
So the question is interesting, isn't it? Because it's talking about becoming something. When we're little, we're just here.
Yes.
We don't feel the need to become anything. So why, as adults, do we feel the need to become something?
Yes.
So let's just come back to what you said, because that is so. I'm English too, and I'm living in South Africa, and then there are the Canadians and the Japanese, and we have these cultures that are very nice. If someone sticks their umbrella spike through our foot, oh, I'm so sorry. We apologize to them. So we have this sort of knee-jerk niceness, that I notice all the time. Often we'll go shopping malls and count how many times, particularly women, say, I'm sorry. We do it all the time, even if we're not even close to each other. So maybe I can do this best by asking you. So why am I being nice? So why are we living from a place of, I'm nice? Why are we doing that? What is it we want?
Wanting connection, wanting, it's and also, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That whole, wanting to be a good person, that's one of my values, so it's kind of like, but at what point does that become destructive? Because
come back, Sarah. It's all, come back to, I want to be good.
Yes.
Where did that come from? It came from that playbook.
From the programming.
Because when we're little, we're just ourselves. Yes. So how many of us say, I just want to be myself? I can't be myself with you. I can't be myself in this job, or I can't be myself. So we're always saying, I can't be myself. So where's this self gone to? Hasn't gone anywhere. It's just, we're so busy contriving a performance. So the question again, you meet me for the first time. What is the real reason you're being nice to me? What are you trying to communicate?
Let me feel.
What's the biggest thing you want to communicate? What's your most important thing you want to communicate to someone you've just met?
If I'm trying to be nice.
Yes.
Well, if I'm trying to be nice, there's I want to be likable. I want to be,
why? Why? What are you trying to communicate? Imagine meeting a dog. Are you familiar with dogs? Yes. And most of us learn, you give them the back of your hand, you don't go aggressively towards the dog. Why is that? Because we're trying to communicate to the dog that we're not threatening. Yes. We learn to bat our eyelids or do the things we do even with human beings. Yes. So the niceness that is very cultural in some places, but for a lot of us, and particularly I think women, what we're trying to do is, I'm trying to prove to you, right as soon as you meet me, that I'm not a threat.
Yes.
And why do I want to prove that to you? Because until I do, you could be a threat to me.
Yes.
And if you go further back, where's that coming from? It's the idea that out there is dangerous.
Yes.
Yes. So rooted in the habit of niceness is a paranoia. Life is dangerous. life can hurt me. So we learn that very, very young. So you see, in that simple thing that seems like, what a lovely culture, we're all so nice.
Yes.
Is a lot of people living from a place of fear. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying breakthrough is all about exploring, where am I coming from? So
Yes.
we do queries like I just did with you, to ask, but why? But where are you? Which is very different to the way most of us ask questions, isn't it? Usually we go, I know this, why? So we go on the internet and we go, so type into Google, what are the health benefits of ice cream or sugar, because we want them to be. And then tailor-made answers come. Oh, you can get this and that and that, it can give you energy. Yes, so we get what we want. And that's how we treat other people. Yes, we ask questions hoping to get the answer we want. Yes, unless
So
we're really...
Esther, I'm feeling like we should reverse roles here, and you can be the interviewer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. It's brilliant. I mean, I'm not. I'm not. This is what it's a discussion at the end of the day. It's not. I think it's great that you're challenging me, and most people that come on, it's great. It's great to this is an action, isn't it? This is where actually people can see it.
That's it. You're asking me about my work, and it's not me lecturing.
No.
I act as a catalyst, but just as much the answers catalyze me. So this is how the work has evolved over 34 years dramatically, because it's constantly throwing me back in. Maybe I question the way I'm looking at that. So it's a deconstructive, negative pathway that of self-inquiry. And the thing about self-inquiry is that we often, I think a lot of us think it can only happen alone. But the more I do this work, I realize we really vitally depend on others to catalyze the ignorance. So we can actually, yes.
Yeah, and I know that you've spoken about how conflict can be one of those really catalyzing aspects, because it that's where we can really see ourselves, by that, are we going to go into that kind of victim blame consciousness, or are we going to take responsibility? And that's a really kind of program piece as well, because I wasn't brought up with taking responsibility. So it's how can we start to deconstruct all of that and step more and more into self-responsibility?
Well, the word is really a problem. Like I said before, I think you say responsibility to anyone and they're going to go, oh, inside. We all have these, like, it's a burden. Yes. Most of us think of it as a burden. Some of us really love it, but oftentimes that's because we like being in control. We all have our relationship with this word, as we do with all words. And how can we be responsible? How can we be, while we literally, it's not just conflict is a piece, the surface mind that we start functioning from or through once we start reaching 4, 5, 6 and older, that surface mind that's so goal-oriented and full of shoulds and shouldn'ts and absolutes and needing certainty and wanting more and more information and more this and that. It has us feeling driven. It has us at war with ourselves. So it's not about, going and breakthrough isn't about going and analyzing, what happened to me in childhood. Not at all. It's about looking, so right now, I'm just, I love a movie. 1976, there's a movie. It's called Network. You might be too young to remember it.
I don't know that.
And, right. And so it's about a newscaster, and he he comes on the air and he starts talking about the plight of the world and everything that's going wrong in the world. And he implores everybody who's watching, get up out of your seat, go to your window and open your window and hang out of it and just shout, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And this movie just, I mean, it was at the time, 1976, you know, it just became such a hit because, of course, we could all relate to it. And nowadays, even more, you know, any teenager can relate to it, an adult. Yeah. So that's in all of us. We suffer because we feel limited by our environment and all kinds of things. Yeah. So breakthrough looks at that rage or the grief or the sadness or these strong emotions that come out in what we call overreaction as something in us wanting to heal. But we can't just do power of positive thinking or self-talk. So it's like, so what is it trying, you know, what's happening? So then we do look at particular conflict and we boil it down, you know, to maybe three sentences first, and we boil it down to 4 words, and then we start to ask questions in a deconstructive process. So this is one aspect of breakthrough. And what people discover is that what they thought they were mad about in the beginning, as they go through, becomes incidental, and they start to see that what they're really suffering from is that this surface mind is full of contradictions. And that brings such compassion. Oh, the conflict, any conflict begins long before I met this person or came into this circumstance. Yeah? And the more, in whatever way we do it, the more we discover where we're really living from and shed light on it. And the nervous system starts to more and more self-adjust. Yeah? And our relationship to ourselves and where we're living from shifts. So our perspective on life shifts. And then it's hard to act from a place of conflict and suffering and pain. You know that when we're hurting, to take practical action is impossible. Yeah? But the more we come from a place where we've felt the compassion for ourselves, we're not blaming ourselves, and we understand more and more, gosh, I know nothing. We're coming from a more and more childlike place, which is naturally responsible. If we watch children, they have a natural instinct to be responsible.
Yes.
Most children, yeah. So we're not trying to get to anything that's missing. We're just trying to get behind, back in touch with what's natural.
I know one of the big questions that you get us to ask is who am I? And you know, it's a really interesting question because of all these preconceptions that we do have about ourselves. You know, what is left when we peel all of that away?
Yes, it was one of the most powerful exercises, you know, that a teacher of mine did with me. And he said, so just close your eyes and I'm going to ask you this question. He said, so who are you? And he instructed me first, just say whatever comes into the mind. So, for most of us, it would be when we state our name, or I'm a body, or I'm this. Or some people say I'm a soul or a spirit, or, different things pop to mind. And each time he would say, but you know about that. And if you know about something, you can't also be it. Yes. So step behind, and as he did that, and at some point, something happens in the mind the first time that exercise happens, and the mind just goes blank, which for a lot of us is an unusual experience, yes? and the nervous system calms, and nothing comes. And the surface mind is not our experience. Actually, what's happened is we're very much in the childlike mind that is much of the time blank. No, doesn't have thoughts going on all the time. They're just immersed in whatever. And that was so powerful for me. So I don't, in Breakthrough, I don't ask that question very much, but it was so powerful. Yes, it had me reevaluating everything. No?
So is it coming more into the experiential moment, when we leave behind all those kind of preconceptions, because you can say, who am I? And you could say, I am love, I am light, but that's just potentially that's just more stuff that we've learned, like you mentioned.
Just words.
Just words, unless we're actually, so is it the embodiment of the experience is that who we are?
When we're asking, who am I? And we start looking for I, it's like we think we're one I looking for another I. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? And if who we are, if I say I'm this, I'm that, and I'm thinking I am something I know about, which is impossible. Essentially, to know myself is impossible, isn't it? Because I already am whatever that or isn't. Yes. What that exercise does is it just tells you, I don't know anything. I mean, heck, if we don't know who we are, isn't it? And you think how much via the surface mind, we're always trying to prove I'm this, I'm that, I'm nice, I'm successful. We're always trying to prove we're something. And if we explore that a little, I mean, if I said to you, Sarah, you're not a woman or a human being, you're an orange. Would you get angry and try to prove you're not?
I'd probably think it was pretty funny if it was an orange, but if it was an offensive sort of a thing, then I may or may not react, depending on if it's one of my triggers or not,
Right. So an illustration I used to do was you go to your doctor and just for a checkup, and you're feeling great, you're on vacation, got a bit of time, have all the tests. Go into him, and he says to you, I don't know, Sarah, you're looking just a little something or other. I think, let me just do some tests. And you have national health, so you don't have to pay. You've got time on your hands. And you say, but doctor, I feel fine. But he says, just, give me peace of mind. So he does all the tests known to man, a whole barrage of tests, says, when I have the results, I'll call you. So you're not worried, you feel great. A few days later, he calls you and he says, Sarah, I think you'd better come in. And if you're identified as a woman, let's say, because nowadays I don't use this example, but let's say you're identified as a woman. And so he says, well, look, I've gone through all the tests and redone the ones I could. And they're all telling me the exact same thing. And he said, I know that you think you're a woman, but actually all the tests are showing you're actually a bunny rabbit. So most people, when I say, what would you do? They laugh and they say, well, I might think my doctor's mad and change doctor.
Yes.
On a couple of occasions, actually once a guy I was dating was like, oh my gosh, got very angry and said, I would sue my doctor, I would change. So then you can tell this is someone who would need breakthrough. But we don't try to prove it. Why?
Yes.
Because you have no doubts about it. You're not going to stand up and lift up your blouse and try and prove you're a woman.
Yes.
You don't care what he thinks. So we don't try to prove something unless we doubt it. In other words, I'm not trying to prove I'm nice unless I doubt it. So you see, I'm trying to prove to you I'm nice.
Mm-hmm.
to prove I'm not a threat because I believe you're dangerous
Yes.
and the world is a dangerous place. So I'm also going to have the belief that I could be dangerous.
Yeah.
So all our beliefs are global. They don't just, and the more we see this, the more we learn you'll remember me saying, for those of you in England or who know Fawlty Towers and John Cleese and so that comedy program, yes? And in it was the John Cleese, the comedian, he was running a hotel and he had this little waiter, Emmanuel, yes, Manuel. And Manuel was always getting into trouble. And John Cleese would always very tall, jump up and down, yes, and go, but Manuel. And Manuel's answer was always, I know nothing, I'm from Barcelona. Yes. I always say in
That's what my
breakthrough.
partner often says, David. He does a really good impression.
So that's what I always say. That's the actually, if there's a goal to break through, is that we get deeper and deeper in touch with our inner Manuel. You know, I know nothing.
So Esther, is the in some ways, is the practice of self-inquiry like a paradox?
Well, yeah, you could say it's paradoxical, but yes, it points you in the direction of paradox. And our minds at any age cannot grasp, can't understand paradox. We can intellectually get what it is, but we can't understand it. But it's a journey into paradox, you might say, that only the nervous system can get. Yeah? And that's why I say that it's all about the nervous system, yes, and the nervous system, yeah, it transforms because all this hand-me-down playbook is held in the myelin sheath, you know, like you know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like around the electric wire, that little bit of plastic. Huh? So it's held in the myelin sheath in the nervous system. And we're constantly, it's firing constantly all
how
the
interesting. So it's like a protective layer, really. That it's literally is a defense of the nervous system. You know, I hadn't taken it quite so literally. I hadn't understood that before.
It's protecting, same way as the surface hand-me-down thinking, this playbook, as it's not, the mind hasn't gone, yeah, I'm going to just give her a terrible life. The mind doesn't know us. We're aware of the mind. It's totally unaware of us, although it's constantly giving us a newscast, you know, on ourselves. It doesn't know anything about us. So
can I just ask you, what is the mind?
Right, that's the whole exploration.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right, so what is it? What do we know about the mind? First thing we know, if we look for it, it's invisible, yeah? Nobody's ever found the mind, yes? Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk about brains, we know there are 3 brains, we could say, yes, the head, the gut, and the heart, yes, that always function in unison. When we're ruled by the surface type of thinking, then we experience living up in our heads, yes, as we do self-inquiry, but it doesn't mean the other 2 centers aren't functioning. It's just that this one, yeah, rules, yeah. So the more we do self-inquiry, that shifts. So our whole physiology and our health changes. But the mind is invisible and the thoughts are invisible. And yet, you know, I often I'll ask a class full of maybe 20 people, so what's your biggest struggle? And they'll say, you know, my boyfriend, my wife, my husband, my job. And finally someone says, my mind. You know? And of course, the greatest struggle in life begins and ends with our mind, although we think it's without there. Yeah.
But it can be such a tool as well, you know, so
it is a tool.
Paradox again, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if we didn't have overreactions, we wouldn't be informed there's something needs addressing. Yes. Mm-hmm. And that childlike mind, you could say, maybe that light within has never gone anywhere. Yes. And it's always there. It underpins the whole life. And it's always shining through. So, everything is paradoxical, yes. But to explore the mind, we have to, yes, we explore all the different dynamics of it. That's what we do. So the very first question is, so how do thoughts get there? So I feel proud of these thoughts. I think, well, that's very clever. I'm like, how can I be thinking this? I'm ashamed of other thoughts. So it's like getting an envelope in our mailbox that's addressed to us with no return address. And it has a whole description of how to lead life. And we just follow this playbook. Yes, well, that would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Don't know where it's come from. But that's literally what we're doing. Although we do say, nah, that came from my parents, so we think we know the origin. But none of them either knew how thoughts got into the invisible mind. So how invisible thoughts get into the invisible mind and then rule and dictate how we live life. Yes. So the question is great. We can't ask it enough and find enough good ways of exploring it.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting.
Instead of, how do I manifest a better life? How can I achieve this or that? Where am I going to? What goals should I set? What is my purpose? What is hope?
I mean, it's an interesting one because this podcast is called New Earth Podcast, and the concept behind it is that stepping into the new potential, the new possibility, so in this podcast, we have the both. We have the kind of people that are speaking to the manifestation, to all that sides of, the becoming. And then we have this very deconstructive side, which is so important because, that and until we clear that programming, it is, it's directing, what we're drawing towards us. But the question that often comes up in the podcast, and I've had so many varied answers to it, and I know it's your question, so I have to ask you this, is, do we have control? Because, a lot of the people that come on do speak about free will and how, when we're in our programming, we're acting out of that. So therefore, we don't have control. But what we do have control of is our minds and the potential to make change in that, and then change in our future. But I suspect that won't be your answer. So I'm really curious to see where you're at with that now, Esther.
Well, I'm not at all trying to say this is how it is. That would be the antithesis of
course.
But it's it is such a great, so the whole idea of, do we have free will or not? It's rather irrelevant, isn't it? Because whether I have free will or not, I'm still going to have to deal with whatever repercussions my actions have, whether they're because I had control over them or not. Yes, so I still am going to have the repercussions of whatever I do. So that's one way of looking at it. And the other way is, yes, to explore. So what do I have control of? Well, we say I'm so out of control, but then when we come just back to looking at the mind, so it's like, so do I have control over my thoughts, seeing as they seem to dictate a lot of my actions and decisions? And yes, so, then I usually ask, so, I don't know, just make a thought. Make a thought right now.
Not possible.
And people struggle for oftentimes just a moment and go, it just popped into my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, like the letter in the hypothetical mailbox. It's like, so if thoughts just pop into our minds and they determine our actions, how do actions happen? So it doesn't take very much, just exploring our own direct personal experience to discover, oh, so maybe I don't know as much as I thought. See, so the more you deconstruct, it's not about arriving at an end place where no, it's never ending.
Yeah.
Because we're human, yes? And as children already, yes, we do.
So it's like
Sensible things.
it's an evolutionary process, which is so powerful, isn't it? Because that is the journey, that we're all on, I think, particularly at these times, because since COVID, the worlds that we knew has been brought to question for a lot of us, so it's kind of, it is an incredible time to challenge and allow that evolution in a way.
And we can't allow it, you see, that's the trouble. So, I mean, this work is so unpopular, deconstructive work, because it's the greatest challenge to the for constructive, you have to become something type of thinking.
Yeah.
But they're totally not separate. They totally catalyze each other. But if we could, allow or accept or embrace or, force ourselves to be open to different things, then we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be struggling.
Yeah, one of my big journeys was, because of this kind of good girl, history, people pleasing, which is still a process, and unfolding, was the perfectionism, and really acknowledging how much that was limiting me. So actually this podcast has been an evolutionary process for me, because I started it and I just did it, and I'm just doing it, and I'm just allowing for whatever comes up to come up, and to just be with that. And if something comes up in me, to work with that, but to just keep doing it as a process, because it was something that was really called for in me to do this. So I think it's important to listen to these things when you have that.
Yeah, because it's not coming from conditioning, is it? It's coming from somewhere deep inside that's that's so natural, so childlike, that's daring to entertain all kinds of possibilities. Yeah.
And to step out of the comfort zone, because it's the shy good girl was the was the model, and so you kind of, I might have Esther on that's kind of like, that challenges, that I might appear stupid in front of everyone. There's all that kind of stuff that could, potentially happen, because it's such an unknown that is live. And I do just share everything. I don't try and edit unless there's some technical problem. I try not to edit. So it's a sort of catalyzing process for me in a way.
Absolutely. Well, yes, how powerful. I would, sorry, my internet's a bit unstable. But I would maybe, you said I step out of my comfort zone. But what I think you really are describing, you can tell me, is that you're just coming from that more natural, spontaneous place that is in all of us. That we're born in that place. We're born in a place that's whatever could happen, where life is an adventure, and I might fall on my face and I might look stupid.
Yes, but it's okay. It's got to live it.
And
allow
yes,
it.
but how it's more courageous because you also have the experience of the playbook. Yes. So something came, yes, deep from within. So the same for, with like breakthrough. It was, although, yes, I was living also from that playbook, there suddenly came the conviction one day, there has to be another way. And I knew there was. And with John too, but he was like, there has to be another way that's not just Band-Aids.
Yes.
So I think you're coming already from a more natural place. You're not stepping out of a comfort zone. I think that's a deeper place in you, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that there's been because I think when you're on this journey, it's a journey of becoming more human. And then it becomes, no matter where you are, and yes, you can get nervous or whatever, and there can be sort of things that come up. But generally, it's harder to keep those up. Like once I start chatting with someone, I have to be myself. I can't. Do you know what I mean? It's just because that's how it is. So it's an interesting one.
And when you're really yourself, it's because you've forgotten about Sarah, isn't it?
Yes,
so when we're
or certainly
ourselves,
forgotten about an audience, it's because then that creates it's I always find the hardest bit the introduction, because you're speaking to the audience. When I start speaking with the guest, it's much easier to just be what in that authentic moment. The introduction, you do have to sort of plan a little bit, because obviously that's the nature of it. So it's less
you remind me of interviews I've seen with Robin Williams, the comedian who was so spontaneous, and he had no filters, and he would just take over the interview, and you'd see the interviewer just sitting there. And I always thought,
wait, I think we need to swap roles, Esther.
No, I thought how courageous of interviewers that they're always, when you're interviewing someone, anything can happen. It's a total unknown. I mean, how powerful is that? So you offer such an amazing service, really do.
And you as well, Esther. It's incredibly powerful work that you do. I'm so immensely grateful. You certainly one of the very instrumental people in making changes in my life. So I'm immensely grateful, and in my whole family is actually. So I know David doesn't watch many of my podcasts, but he'll definitely watch this one.
Well, I think of the words of Ram Dass, we're all just leading each other home. Yes.
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? And that is a big theme in this podcast, is how can we do that? Stand together and support each other, and coming out of that old competitive kind of mode of operation. How can we hold each other in this way?
I think the more we recognize the common ground we have as human beings. So a lot of what I spoke about today was really something every single human being could relate to. Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Every single human being, it doesn't matter what culture or background or anything.
Yes.
We all live from a place that's like, gosh, life is really difficult and challenging.
Yes.
So knowing we have that suffering in common, surely we're all then can live from a place of compassion. Yes. So it's that common ground that unites us all, no matter whether we're a dictator, a serial killer, or Mother Teresa.
Yes.
Yeah, we come from the same place.
Yeah. Yes. That's what opens up the compassion.
Yeah, and it does all the work. That's the thing of self-inquiry. More and more compassion bubbles up, and with it, the nervous system does all the work. See,
yes.
Compassion does all the work. I often think that's what meant is love, but love is all, although we have all these ideas about love.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share, or any questions you'd like to ask me before we finish up today, Esther?
No, I'm sorry.
I'm a little bit nervous to say that in case we go into it. No, go ahead, whatever comes through.
No, I know I'm like a bull in a china shop. I'm always being told that. But, I feel so strongly, and I've, since childhood, we all feel so strongly about cutting through, whatever it is that keeps us from just being ourselves, isn't it? Yes, and your work you're doing, you're catalyzing these questions in all of us too. So yeah, and you are also demonstrating, that capacity to do it even though we're terrified of doing it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Esther. It's been an absolute delight, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast again at some point. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. Do hit the subscribe so you can receive more New Earth podcasts. Bye for now.